Welcome to Underwater CSI International Revealed. I'm your host, Senior Investigator Rich Morin, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime.
The good-looking co-host, Senior Investigator Ed Myring.
And joining us tonight is Master Scuba Diver Trainer John Osborne, who is a very important part of this show. John, how you doing tonight?
Good,
Good. Look a little tired, buddy.
definitely.
Yeah, I know you had a rough day today. Hang in there. All right, be a good show. And also joining us tonight is Chad Flynn. Chad, how are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, Rich.
Chad, can you give us a little background as far as what your experience is and why I asked you to be on tonight's show?
Sure. I have about 13 years of fire department experience. I'm also a certified diver. Prior to doing that, I was with a local EMS agency, and we responded to the Ethan Allen incident in conjunction with the local fire department. At the time, we were basically on medical standby with the divers for their
the dive
needs.
team itself.
Yeah.
For that particular team that got called out. Okay. And how many years do you have as EMS?
8 years between paid and volunteer.
You took a little hiatus right now to raise your daughter?
For on the fire side, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Chad will have some insight on that as far as what was going on up on the road, trying to get to the site, et cetera. And, his viewpoint as far as, what it looks like when he was arriving at a scene that was pretty chaotic going on. But Ed,
Sir,
how you doing, buddy?
good, as always,
All right. So part 2, we were talking about, the Ethan Allen tour boat that capsized October 2nd, 2005, 48 people on board, 47 passengers and the pilot. And we had 20 deceased, 28 survivors. We had 6 dead on the surface, 14 we pulled out of the boat. We actually pulled 13 out, and one of the sheriff's dive teams later on that day found the 14th victim. Anyway, so if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, please go back and watch those first, because that'll kind of give you a great insight as far as where we are right now. Today's show, we're going to talk about the actual recovery of the vessel the following day on Monday, October 3rd. We got hired by the NTSB through the local county to do some of the forensics and investigative work and to raise the vessel. So that was quite lengthy. But before we get going on that, I just want to do a correction from the last show. We were talking about the sheriff's dive team that showed up later on in the day. I had heard from what I thought was a reputable source at that point that the dive team was off training on the western part of the state. I got a call from the shift commander who was on duty that day, October 2nd, who's now retired, but gave me a call, and we had a chat. And he said, "Hey, Rich," he says, and I've known this guy for a long time, Rick Backus. He was a sergeant at the time, shift commander, and Rick said, "Hey, I just want to set something straight." He says, "We weren't actually out training that day." He said, "It was a Sunday, and we when the call came in, he said a lot of our dive team members are, got some seniority, so they have Sundays off." He said, "So we've got to find all these people to get them to come in." He says, "And the people that were on duty, we've got to find replacements for them. We can't just pull everybody off the road. We got to find
Right.
replacements for them until the dive team, can get together at headquarters." So that's why it took them quite a while, to track everybody down, et cetera. And I also said, well, while we're talking, I said the same individual told me that the sheriff was golfing up at the Sagamore Resort. Is that true? And he said, no. And you'd think Sunday that the sheriff, day off.
Right.
He said, no, he was actually working. And I said, good, because in my FOIA papers that I requested, I found a statement from him saying that he was at work. So I was like, geez, it's a little bit of a conflict. And I'm glad you called, because now I've got somebody to verify that. And he said, yeah, when the call came in, he said, I contacted the sheriff. I called his office and right down the hall and told him what happened. And he thought I was messing around, and he slammed the phone down. He said, so I ran down the hall, and as soon as I stood in the doorway and he saw my face, he was like, oh boy, he knew that there was an issue.
Right.
So
There's a problem.
just wanted to clarify that. And Rick, we appreciate it. Thanks for calling. And I really enjoyed chatting with you, and enjoy retirement, buddy. I know you're living south now, enjoying the warmer weather. But it was great talking with you.
So I just want to go back real quick. So just what you were saying about the dive team, right? So there's been instances where we've gotten a call and we've had to do the same thing. Many times we've gotten calls where we're scattered all over, right? Where we're in different areas, we're on vacation, or it's a weekend, and people are having barbecues or cookouts or whatever, and we're in different locations. But like you said before, the phone rings, your day changes, and now, just like what was happening with their team, you or I are calling people going, hey, meet us at headquarters so that we can start putting the team together, start packing up and going to this recovery, right?
Yeah, giving our
So I mean,
briefing and going over everything. Yeah.
right. So we know exactly how they felt and what happens during
Yeah,
things like
because
that.
they're not in a financial position to have a full-time dive team every
Right.
single day just sitting there waiting for a call.
Right.
Right. It's just not cost effective. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Right. Just like us, we can't have, it's not like we've got like bellhops and they're all just sitting there lined up waiting for the next suitcase to carry up to your room.
Right.
You just ring a bell and it's like, all right, next.
Yeah.
And, diver comes up in all their gear. No, like you were saying, we gotta start making the calls. And sometimes it gets a little challenging trying to hunt people down.
Right.
Yep.
So we know what that's like.
Yeah, exactly what he was talking about when he told me that. It's like, we've been there many, many, many times,
Right.
many times. And, a lot of times people are frantic. We need somebody here now, now. It's like,
Right.
we got to put a team together.
Yeah.
And they don't realize how much is involved. I mean, if they had ever seen all the equipment that we had,
Right.
and I mean, just hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff, and just it's not all packed, in big tractor trailer trucks. I mean, we've got to think about the job and pack accordingly. Now we
Right.
had a lot of stuff pre-packed, so it's like, okay, well, if we get this kind of a job, these containers go,
Right.
stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely, we certainly understand that.
So I think the last show you were talking about, I think you got into it that the rigging, so the actual rigging that you put together, the for almost like a cradle for underneath the vessel.
Exactly. Yep. We
So I think that's where we left off.
our team got together early in the morning on Monday. Now, I'd been up a lot during the night doing research on the vessel and figuring out how we're gonna do this and try to protect, any potential evidence. So we met very early. We went over everything. We repacked everything, and brought a lot of gear. Just in case we needed something. It wasn't like, well, somebody's got to drive all the way back to headquarters to get it and drive all the way back again. So a lot of stuff gets packed. So at that point, we we were working off a barge. The cruise boat company who owned the Ethan Allen, they had a big work barge that they brought up and anchored down just outside where the Ethan Allen was, and then we kind of used that as a staging area, a work platform. So we, the first thing we had to do is drop down and do an exploratory dive, just to make sure that all of our information that I was researching the night prior to was going to work, and rigging points and stuff like that, which we wanted to try to do as few as possible on the vessel. But you have to rig something, otherwise your line could slip out if one bag gets a little bit more air than the other,
Right.
or your harness system. So myself and another senior investigator dropped down, along with a member from the New York State Police dive team. We wanted him to videotape everything again for CYA, cover your hiney there. So we dropped down, did our exploratory dive on that, came back up. John, I think you were up on the barge at this point, right? On the work platform up there.
Yeah.
after we came back up. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we came back up, decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to build this big cradle system out of 5/8" yellow polypropylene line, put all of our rigging loops in at different stages of height going down so that we can do a 3-lift procedure on this particular vessel. All right. At that point,
They
we'll
were
get,
also reviewing the videotape.
oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah. So we were going over the videotape and showing the team, okay, this is what we're going to have to do. And this is where we're going to be rigging onto, et cetera.
So John,
Yeah.
that was a video that they did right on that exploratory dive. So you
Yes.
review. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot all about that. Thanks. Um, yeah. So I forgot. Yeah. We did that videotape. So now we've got sections of line that we need cut and then, start braiding um, everything together. So it took a while. I think it took probably a couple hours to do all that. Well, first thing in the morning, Mark Rosenkar, who was the head of the NTSB at the time, came up to me and he was like, "What time can we tow this boat? What time's it going to be up and we can tow this out of here?" And I was like, "Wait, Mark, we got a lot of work to do. A lot of work. It's not like we can just, and up it comes." Um, so I told him, I said, "Well, if everything goes right, I said, we're probably looking at 8 o'clock tonight." He was like, "Okay." And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So anyway, we get the harness done and we decide that, again, just minimal amount of people are going to go down and set the harness system itself. And then, do all the rigging on it, the bags and stuff. And then we'll bring the team down that's actually going to help, raise the vessel up.
So that was first thing in the morning, right?
Correct.
Um,
Again, now we're working toward later morning now
right.
because maybe even noonish time
Okay.
because, it took a long time to, to create that harness, that cradle.
Right. So
You know,
Chad, were were, were you there on that Monday with the supporting the other dive team, or they were not there that day?
Yeah, no, we were just there on the initial call.
Okay. So
on Sunday. Yeah.
okay, on
Yeah,
Sunday.
this
Okay.
Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me go back a little bit. So Chad, when you brought the ambulance up, um, could you come right down to the staging area?
Absolutely not. The access road down to staging, as you guys know, is a very small and actually somewhat steep road. We actually, I drove the ambulance in. We actually got held right at the top of the hill for at least, I want to say, half an hour before I could progress down in with the ambulance.
And once you
Um,
got down there, could you understand why?
Absolutely.
I mean, there was very little place to turn around. The homeowner that we were doing all the staging area on was very concerned because his septic system was right there. And he was afraid that some of these larger trucks were going to crush his septic system. So we were trying to, coordinate that and stake it out to keep people off of that, et cetera. But we did a good job tearing his lawn up. That's for sure.
So Chad,
Backing off.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So Chad, what was that like when you were able to get down there? I mean, uh, what was the scene like when you got down there? I mean, um, th- did you guys park the ambulance and then assist, or um, what was that like?
We basically are that ambulance. We were there strictly for any needs of the dive team that we were responded with.
Okay.
But utter chaos is probably the best explanation I can give you.
Hmm.
When I finally got back down into the scene itself and parked the ambulance, I believe that was actually in episode 2 there. What you guys did an aerial view
Right.
of that, and you could see the driveway where staging was within 100 feet from where the victims were actually staged on the shoreline. There is where I parked that ambulance.
Okay.
So it was pretty chaotic, but I think at that point, pretty much all victims were recovered. And I think what took so long for our ambulance to get down there, like you said, it was a very tight lack of room area, we were held at the top to allow surviving victims to get in ambulances and brought to the hospital.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, good point.
So the deceased were still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a little mind blowing, huh? Seeing that many victims.
Absolutely. I at that time, I'd already been riding with that emergency squad for 3 years during high school. Um, and then, I actually graduated that year and became a full member and a driver at the time. But even at that age, I believe I was 19, I had seen other pretty bad accidents and such before, but that is just of a magnitude I probably never see again.
Right.
So,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
That's some
Yeah, a
good
lot of
insight.
people, especially for their first time seeing a large amount of victims like that, it can be rough. I mean, they were all under sheets.
Yep.
They had sheets over all of them, so it's not like they were just laying there exposed.
Right.
But and again, the bodies were handled with a lot of respect, and carefully laid out, etc. But yeah,
Now,
so
okay, so the dive team, so our team goes back in with the rigging.
right, we set the harness, we set the
Okay.
bags.
Okay.
Yep, so everything's ready to go, and then come up and do another briefing to our team, and we wanted our team to basically take care of the initial lift on it.
Right.
We had an individual from one of the departments that insisted that they be on it, so we had to oblige them. And then we also wanted the state trooper down there doing the videotape
Right.
to make sure. Now, again, this is after we had already gone down our initial one, and we saw that the rudder was hard to port and the throttle was full throttle on that, etc.
And that was all documented by our team.
Yeah, and the windows were ripped down. No, that was documented by the New York State Police also.
Right. Right.
Yeah, videotaped and stuff. So anyway, so now we're getting ready to do the actual lift. All right, so we go down, and John, if I'm not mistaken, you were on the stern on the starboard side.
Correct.
Right. Across from you was one of our other staff members, Bill,
Yes.
and up toward the bow was Chris, and on the right-hand side was a person from one of the other teams. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So once everybody was in position, and we practiced cracking the valves, as far as making sure everybody was on the same page for the distance. We gave the signal, and the valves were turned open just a little bit. We just want air to start hissing in a little bit.
Right.
So we want the boat to lift up slowly. Wasn't sunk in the mud at all. It was actually in a relatively sandier area. The bow or the stern was still up just a little bit higher than the bow was, and the boat slowly started to rise. Took us a little bit longer to ascend. Once the boat hit the surface, the roof of the boat, we still needed to do a safety stop. But this is what it looked like when it hit the surface, and we had our other staff members up there to secure and hold everything there. But so that's just the roof of the canopy itself.
Right here.
Seal Glory was actually the first thing to pop up, and I wish that I was on the surface to see that, because people said it was pretty amazing seeing the flag, be the first thing coming up out of the water.
And there's a blown up shot of it right there.
Yep. Now, we had to calculate this so that we just wanted it to kiss the surface, just like it is right now. So we put just enough bags on it to where this is what happened. There wasn't enough lift to get it up. That's what the next, below those bags was the next loops that we could rig onto. So another set of bags were brought out and were rigged onto, and then hey, John, that's you in the center right there. The next set of bags were brought out and, rigged onto, and then the second lift occurred.
Yeah.
And so
oh, sorry. I missed the picture because this is an important picture as well. This goes back to prior to you dropping down to set all the rigging. So this is the work barge that the team was working off of. I apologize for missing that photo.
Yeah, no worries. I forgot we had this photo. Good. Glad you remembered
The
this.
other nice thing about the photo is it shows the equipment that was used to contain the fuel,
Yep, the boom
Right.
up on the
Yeah.
surface.
Yep.
fuel and
So,
oils type stuff.
And
Yep.
that aerial shot that you had from the other shows that showed all the booms also. So they're quite large, a
Right.
huge area that we
Yep.
were collecting the fuel from.
yeah.
But
So that's
and this was just prior to dropping down for the initial lift because that's our team in the water that was dropping down.
right. Here's the
Um,
team here.
Right. We had the 4 people that were on the bags, myself and the New York State Police diver that was going to be doing the video work on it. Go back to another shot before towing,
Okay.
where you can see the boat on this. That's like right there, like that's
That
good
one?
right there. Yep, that's good right there. So this right here was actually the 3rd lift. So each time it came up a little more and a little more, and so this was the 3rd lift right here. And at that point, we decided that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave it there. That's the loops that we had put on for. And the reason we did this is we still wanted it to be bottom heavy at this point, so that we're going to tow it now over to the bay into 10 feet of water. We're drafting roughly 8 feet here. And so we wanted to tow it into 10 feet of water. So if anything happened and the boat, had to go back down or we had to set it back down for re-rigging on it, we don't want it to go all the way back down to, 59 feet.
Right.
So now you can go to the shot, Ed, if you can find that one again with the
Oops.
sheriff's boat towing it.
Oh, here's another good shot of
Yeah,
blowing
another
up
good shot right there. Just give you an idea of the
Oops.
amount of bags. Hey, perfect. And there's
Yeah.
the boom right there.
Yep.
So you can see the size of it. And then eventually what happens is the 2 ends that are loose come together,
Right.
and then they're pulled into a work boat to
get to
gather
that
all the
shot.
fuel.
Here we go.
So this one right here, when you blow it up, you can see the tow rope
Yep, right here.
from the sheriff's boat. Yep. And we're just slowly bringing it in. We've got our staff still around the boat checking to make sure that all the rigging stays intact and that we are in good shape, that the boat's not going to roll at all, et cetera.
Right. Or
You can see
if-
there's a Lake George patrol boat on the upper left-hand side. And I forget whose vessel that is in the upper right, but you can see the camera equipment that they have,
Yep, right here.
TV cameras and stuff.
Yep, here and here.
Yep. And then we've got a sheriff's boat that you can just see the stern
Yep.
on the right side, right on the edge there.
And
this-
also when it came up, the life vests that were on board came out of the boat.
Yeah.
So those
And-
all had to be collected.
okay.
Yeah, and that's what you see on the top left-hand side, the Lake George boat. You
Right
see
here?
him reaching out with a gaff there, yeah.
Yep.
Grabbing onto the life vests that were all floating on the surface now. Yep.
And now,
Victims had no time to find and secure life vests.
right. And the staff stays in the water as well because in case any of those bags start to leak out or anything, they can respond quick enough to go ahead and get more air in them.
Yeah. And myself and the other senior investigator, that's me on the right-hand side with the yellow helmet on.
Right here.
And you'll notice I've got a set of doubles on.
Yep.
We actually, the 2 of us go down with tech gear so that we have plenty of air. Again, just what if, you plan for the worst case scenario that you can
Right.
possibly think of. So we wanted to make sure we wouldn't have to get out of the water to change tanks, that we had plenty of air. Those are Russell Steel 120s I think we were diving with. So we had, lots and lots and lots of air that he was also the same person that helped with the body recoveries.
There's another good close up right here.
Yep.
And then you could see people.
Oh yeah, so I was a New York State Police boat then that was doing the video work.
There
Yep.
you go.
This shot right here, this was once we got it over into the bay, and you can see it's getting dark out. And this is once we got it over to the bay, we actually set it back down again, redid the rigging on it. We actually shortened some stuff up. We made some new lines for rigging, etc. and this was the final lift right here to bring it right up out of the water total. And so then you can see the hoses
Yep.
that are kind of in the center there, the green
Right here.
hoses right there. We have pumps. We got 2 pumps that are pumping the water out. And then already on board, we have investigators that already, I wanted them to hold off just a little bit because we barely had enough lift right now just to get the gunnels out of the water. And I didn't want to put any more weight on the boat
Right.
and possibly have it, fill back up with water again, where we're fighting a losing battle. But so here we're pumping it out still. You can see one of our team members up toward the bow with the short
here.
sleeves on there. Yep, those are 2 of our team members right there working on the pumps, and the others are investigators from the NTSB and the New York State Police. Those were investigators that were on the vessel, starting to look at. You can see they're at the helm area right now, looking at that. And after we got it pumped out and the boat was floating, it was hooked up to be towed, and it left the bay at 8 o'clock on the nose. I mean, it was 8 o'clock right on. And I remember Rosenkar looking at me, shaking his head, going, "You can't cut it any closer than that. You told me 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it's heading out of here."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, thankfully everything went right.
Right.
We just took a good guess is what it was, really. It's like, we've done a lot of this stuff in the past, and here's what I think is going to happen.
Right. Right. Well, and that's the point, right?
Yeah. Because again, we're not handling it as just a standard recovery of something that an insurance job
Right.
that we've already investigated, and now we're bringing it up and getting it out of there. This is, potential crime scene.
Right.
And we
Exactly.
got to, handle it completely different.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the actual recovery is now complete, and then from that point, where's the boat actually end up?
It was taken down into Lake George Village and then put on a trailer, and then it ended up going to a secret area, which was a hangar at the airport.
Okay.
Is where it was put at. So,
Okay.
yeah. So anyway, that's and then the NTSB started their investigation on it.
Right.
But we got a lot more to talk about. We're
Okay.
going to talk about the some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes. Now, the particular company that owned the Ethan Allen, they had purchased an insurance policy in good faith, all right, for their boats. And after the capsizing, it was discovered that the insurance company that sold them the policy was not licensed to do business in the state of New York, nor were they licensed to do business anywhere, because it turned out to be a shell company that was owned or run by a law firm in the country of Panama that had hundreds of shell companies around the world. And what they were doing is they were funneling money through their shell companies to launder this money, all right, for politicians and royalty from around the globe, not just the United States, but from around the globe. So you got a lot of powerful people. And this Panama Papers is what the heading of the story was, the Panama Papers. This all happened as a result of the capsizing of the Ethan Allen. There's a movie out. It's a Netflix movie. It's called The Laundromat, again, because they're laundering the money. It's called The Laundromat. You got a picture of that, Ed?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, if you can pull that up. And it stars Meryl Streep, Gary Oldman, and Antonio Banderas. Kind of a funky movie. I'm not real happy with the way that they've done that, but they didn't consult me on it. But kind of a funky movie, and I think they kind of maybe did it a little bit that way to appease some of the guilty parties on it. But Meryl Streep's role, she was playing the widow of one of the victims that we recovered from the Ethan Allen.
Right.
And she was wondering what was going on with the insurance and, et cetera. And so she started to do her own investigation because nobody was getting involved in it.
Right.
which was making her extremely angry. So if you get a chance, go and watch this, and it'll basically explain from, where we ended up. She continued on, and eventually exposed this law firm in Panama.
Right.
Um,
So before you get into any depth with all that, can you just kind of show us or elaborate a little bit on the amount of documentation? Because again, all this is factual information, right?
Yep.
It's all been investigated. It's all um, what we think has all been documented. It may not have been documented exactly the way we thought, but um, do you have that paperwork right there available with you, or
I've got a lot of it. I've got
right?
hundreds and hundreds of pages here. And
Okay, yeah,
my desk is kind of scattered with it right now,
okay,
because I've been reading through a lot of it.
right,
But a lot of the stuff disappeared. I put in a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act or Freedom of Information Law, so FOIA or FOIL, to multiple departments. Here's one that I got back from the New York State Police, and I had requested. It took months and months and months. They weren't very quick at all, but I guess they have a very limited amount of people that are working on them, and they do it for the state. But I went through the state police here and requested lots of stuff, including the videos, including reports from the troopers that were there, et cetera. And so here's what I've got for response. It says, this letter responds to your request for records under the Freedom of Information law received by New York State Police. A search of our files failed to locate any records responsive to your request. Worst marine life accident, or not marine life, but worst marine accident that occurred in upstate New York ever. And there's no documentation. Funny. Please be advised that this agency maintains only those records associated with New York State Police arrests and investigations. Well, I think this would probably be an investigation, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you could see one of the New York State boats there.
And it also said we do not maintain records for other police agencies in New York. Well, one of the issues was with other agencies, I wasn't getting any response from them either. And on a lot of the stuff that I was requesting, I did get a lot, but a lot of the stuff that I did get wasn't even stuff I requested.
Right.
So, and I'll read another letter here in a second, but it says pursuant to public officers law, and then the law stated any person denied access to the record may appeal in writing that determination within 30 days. Please state a specific ground for the appeal and send to, which I did. Again, no response as far as can't find any records. And up at top it says, hey, well, this department only handles, doesn't matter. I can put in a FOIA request anywhere with the state police, and it's up to them to get it to the right person, not me. I don't know who the right person is. They
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of odd that I waited months and months and months and months, and zippo, nothing.
Yeah.
And Jeannie has we've got a granddaughter who's a New York State trooper, and I mean, man, they got to write reports on everything. I mean, they
Right.
document everything.
Well, yeah. So I was going to go to Chad on that, right? So Chad, obviously, you guys being on scene, somebody's writing a report about you guys showing up, times, arrival times, departure times, all those types of things. I'm sure somebody's doing that, right? Within your department.
Absolutely. Every one of our ambulances that went on a call, the other ones that took for every patient that was transported, even our standby with the dive team at the staging area, so to speak, you would fill out what is called a PCR, and that is, that's turned into New York State Department of Health, every single one. So there's definitely documentation of every ambulance that responded to that for whatever reason.
Right. Right. So
And I've got lots of documentation on the victims. I mean, they sent me everything.
yeah.
I never requested it. but that was a lot of the papers that they sent me was on that. But I'd like to read another one though too, and because this was handled, I thought very, very tactfully. And when I put in a second FOIL request, um, I got again, hey, we can't find anything. And so I basically put in a complaint. I said, geez, I mean, I didn't get any 911 calls. I didn't get any transcripts. I didn't get any, documentation on any of that I requested. I didn't get any of the conversation between the dispatcher and the supervisor. I didn't get any radio calls. As far I got the radio calls, but I didn't get the transcripts of what was being said on it. I just got call number, blah, 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 to so and that was
Right.
it. And then it would go on to the next line. But the current sheriff, because the sheriff at the time in 2005, he has since passed away. The current sheriff, who we also certified as a diver, he sent me a response, and it said senior clerk so and so shared details of a recent Freedom of Information law request and response relating to the Ethan Allen accident on Lake George. She was seeking clarification and guidance from me on how to best respond to your most recent email. Please know that a FOIL request in its simplest form is a request for copies of business records of a municipal government agency. We provide any records that are available and relate to each request, unless the records are prohibited or exempt from release. I received her most recent response, and it appears accurate. If I were to number each paragraph of your request, paragraphs 1 through 4 and 7 seek copies of transcripts. We do not transcribe agency records, therefore, no records are available. It's not that the records have been denied, rather, we just don't create or maintain transcripts. There is no record that memorialized what you are seeking in paragraph 5. FOIL does not require an agency to provide information, simply records. But if we could gather what you are seeking, I would personally share it with you. I know exactly where I was when I received that call, but unfortunately, that sheriff has since passed away. The lady who was trying to fulfill our FOIL request explained that she completed a thorough review of all your records that relate to this accident and could not locate any reports or narratives from Marine Patrol deputies that the request made in paragraph 6. I would agree that this is unusual, but at the time, all the Marine Patrol deputies were part-time employees, and it appears none completed a computer narrative that memorialized their actions. Sadly, I do not have the ability to inquire with the deceased sheriff why these narratives were not completed. All of the records that were generated and submitted relating to the Ethan Allen accident were bound in 3 separate volumes, which I got. They sent me all 3 of those. I showed them on the first show.
Right.
But again, a lot of stuff that was that we considered extremely important, especially the 911 calls. None of it ever materialized, and none of the police reports materialized
Right.
on that, regarding some of that. So who knows? Maybe the deceased sheriff got a little pressure from who knows who, once everything started to go crazy with the Panama situation. So I
Right.
mean, we just don't know.
Yeah.
But
So I don't know if you want to get into we do episode 4 and we do the ending, kind of going through the insurance side of it, the Panama papers, a little bit more about the movie, The Laundromat, and do episode or part 4 for the ending. What do you think about that?
I think we could probably wrap it up tonight.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, it's not going to take that much longer. The movie, I mean, basically, we recommend, hey, if you're interested and you like this story, by all means, watch the movie,
Right.
because it's going to really expose, the corruption that this accident ended up opening up,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So as far as the insurance goes, one of the things is, it's my belief that what happened was it was like, oh boy, all right, who are we going to get to pay all these claims, and pay the lawyers and pay the courts and everything else. I
Right.
mean, who are we going to get? Who on that body of water has an insurance policy that can handle all this? There's a competing company, that has much larger boats, very large boats. One of them was the one that they were claiming that caused this accident.
Right.
And that's who they ended up going after. They said it
But
was
I
a
mean, the other
5 foot.
part of it also is, as far as the insurance would be, is just getting the bodies back to. Look, a lot of them were from Michigan, so kicking
Yeah.
them to Michigan and stuff like that.
Yeah, they all had to be transported. So I mean, huge expenses. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of expenses that are here.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. That
Yeah.
maybe people have, we did talk about it in part one and part two that they weren't from the area. That's a good
Yeah,
point,
from
John.
Michigan.
Right.
Yeah. So, I didn't even think about that part of the expense, John. That was good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can imagine the expense involved and the lawsuits that eventually came around and, et cetera. Just huge.
Yeah.
So, I remember testifying. They actually had us go out of the area. We ended up heading south toward an Albany area, and I had to go down and testify, and told from what we did, et cetera. But I also explained that, hey, just like I talked about on one of the prior shows, if somebody pushes you hard enough from behind and you're going to fall on your face, where are you putting your hands? And everybody agreed out here. Would
Right.
anybody do this and reach behind them and try to find something? No. All right. So then how do those windows get ripped out of the ceiling on the starboard side?
Right.
I mean, tell me another way that it could have happened. They grabbed onto them, and for support as the boat's capsizing, they grabbed onto them and slid right underneath. We never saw a magical 5 foot wave. We were doing surface navigation, quite a few hundred yards away. And if a 5 foot wave had come into us, it would have just knocked everybody toward the shore. There
Right.
was no 5 foot wave. We watched the boat roll over. There's no 5 foot wave. It's a magical wave anyway. To actually, when the waves come off the back of the boat, they're coming off like this. So if the boat's heading north, that wave's got to come down and around Kramer Point, and so it's got to go southwest, and then it's got to head west, and then go just a little northwest, and then hit that boat at the exact moment he's in the middle of a starboard turn.
Right.
Right. I think what happened was this story was kind of brought up because of a radio call that occurred from up in the boat landing area. After the accident occurred, somebody got on the radio and said, it must have been this particular boat. It throws out a 5 foot wave every time it goes by and almost capsizes my boat.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Which is,
And it's not like you get a rogue wave in the middle of the lake.
yeah. And it's not true because, I showed the picture. That boat went by us on Monday when we were doing the recovery. And the stern of that boat, we blew it up, and you can see it throws a 1.5 foot roller. Chad, you've been up on that lake a bunch of times. You've seen that boat 100 times.
I have. I think I've been on that boat too, and I've
Yeah.
never seen a 5 foot wave.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine a 5 foot wave up there with all the smaller vessels that are up there?
Oh, even the amount of kayakers and canoeists that frequent the shoreline.
It'd be capsizing them left and right. It would never be allowed to operate. That boat's been on the lake over 110 years, probably close to 120 years now.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
want to
think
go.
of that causing an accident of such
Yeah.
I want to go
magnitude.
back. Yeah, it's a good point, Chad. I want to go back to that picture. So here's the blown up shot of it, of the stern.
Right. Show
So-
the one where it's not blown up, Ed.
Okay.
All right.
There it is.
Look at the small boat there. Look
Yeah.
at the wake that thing's throwing out. All right. I mean, the other one, I mean, it's just a roller.
Yeah.
And that's all that came into shore. Just like we've, I mean, this boat goes by us a couple times a day, if we're up there training, if we're up there for a full day, and we've never had issues.
Yeah.
As far as a wake goes.
Well, it's like you said, if we were standing uh, or if you were standing in waist high water and John was out with the turnaround point for the surface navigation, John would have ended up in your lap if you had a 5 foot wave come in.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that John's never landed in your lap before for any reason, but I mean, right, John?
I mean, the attorneys and the judge, went into chambers, and next thing you know, they're hammering out a deal, and they end up finding this competing boat company guilty, and
Right.
I think they got hosed. I think they got hosed big time.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, you know, victims got paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, you got to feel better for the victims, but feel sorry for this other company that that I believe, from everything that we've uncovered, got hosed royally.
Right. Yeah. And if the audience, if you get a chance, watch that movie, The Laundromat. It's like you said, Rich, it's kind of a strange movie, but it
It's a
really,
little slow. You got to stick with it.
yeah, that's another good point, John. Yeah, and it's
and I
but
wonder
it
how
hits
much,
home though. But it hits
yeah,
home. Yeah.
and I wonder how much pressure Hollywood gets from something like that also, uh, because I'll tell you, the media squashed that story pretty quick, and I mean, it should have been, people should have been in an uproar, and they should have demanded accountability and prosecution of these people that are just ripping us off blind. I
Right.
mean, just stealing all our money.
Yep.
And we're not talking about small amounts. I mean, like I said, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. This law firm is just funneling money through and taking their cut. I mean, they're
Yeah.
making huge, huge money.
Yep.
Now, one thing that never even made the papers in that particular area where it happened was, I think it was, I want to say it was 2012. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it was 2012. So like 7 years later, two of the people from that law firm ended up going to prison over this, the Panama Papers
Oh, really?
situation. Yeah, but it was kind of more like a slap on the wrist. It's not like they went to prison for life
Yeah.
on it. I forget how many years they got, but it wasn't much at all, and it was probably a medium or easy security prison system. I'm not
Right.
sure, but
So
it never even made the papers in that area. So
No, definitely didn't.
crazy, crazy, crazy.
so before we end, talk a little bit about the production company that interviewed you. John, did the production company interview you as well
Yeah, he was
from New
he's
York
on it.
City, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. So just talk
There's a Emmy
briefly about
award-winning
that.
production company, called Austin Street Productions, and the executive producer Bill Hunt. Um, he actually contacted me for something else,
Right.
and we started talking about the Ethan Allen. And he was like, "Whoa!" He said, "Man, I'd really like to do a documentary on this." And so he did. I mean, he did a beautiful job on it.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that he's going to. John and I were both on it, and I'm hoping that he's going to be able to sell it to one of the networks for this October for the 20th anniversary of the capsizing of the Ethan Allen.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, but at one point in there, I just say, and it happened to actually be right at the very end of the movie. Also, they repeated it. I just said, why can't they just tell people the truth? I mean, I've said this on other shows. We've worked for so many agencies over the years, and other than the Costa Concordia in Italy, I don't ever remember working for an agency where they didn't lie to the public, and I just never could understand it. Never could understand it.
Right.
And one of the upcoming shows that we're going to talk about, the Stella Mare cargo ship. Do you have a picture of that, Ed, or no?
Um, I don't think so. Not handy, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think I sent it to you yet. But the Stella Mare cargo ship that overturned with the Russian crew on it, same thing, big cover up, and when the politicians get involved and the upper echelon from departments get involved, and it's just a mess. They just make everything a mess.
Right.
It
One
could
of
have
the
been
things I never
resolved.
could understand was a lot of times, if you look at a lot of the maritime disasters and stuff,
Yep.
it's due to modifications to the boat.
Yeah.
And it's like, why isn't there a check on the boat after a modification or even before as to what's that's going to do to the properties of the boat?
Exactly.
Yeah.
A prior approval on it.
Yeah.
And the Ethan Allen had multiple modifications. It had a engine replacement, went into a larger engine, deck was raised, and then the canopy was
The
added,
canopy, right.
So I mean, that put a lot of extra weight on it and made it top heavy on top of everything else.
Right. And another good
Um,
point, John, that's a good point because the same thing when we did one of the plane recoveries, right? Pontoons too small for that plane.
yeah.
Goes back to John's point. I mean, when you make modifications or you add something, you know, you would think somebody would say, or there would be, some other type of check and say, wait a minute, those modifications to that boat, it's going to make the boat, you know, draft more water, or those pontoons are going to be too small for that size plane.
Or
You know,
just the additional weight, now it's
right,
sitting lower in the water.
right, right.
Buoyancy characteristics have changed.
Yeah, exactly.
That
But it
boat's
is
still in
truly
service.
amazing if you go and look at a lot of the disasters. It goes back to that type of thing where there was a modification.
Yeah. And I believe that boat is in operation now up on one of the Great Lakes. I want to say Lake Erie, but I'm not positive. And from what I understand, I think it's now only registered for 15 passengers and a crew of 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
As it
So
should be.
versus 50,
Yeah.
because it was actually, approved for 50 passengers on a 48 or 50-foot long boat.
Right.
Yeah, crazy. But
Yeah.
again, back in the early 60s, people weren't fat, and they weren't as tall. I mean, to get 50 people on board, I mean, I forgot after the weight calculations what it was, but I mean, it was well over 2,000 pounds over its maximum weight capacity.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot. That's
Yeah.
why when and actually, Chad, you and I talked about this before. What got my attention, because you were like, hey, why did you pay attention to this? Well, when I was standing in water with another senior investigator, and we were watching the students do the surface navigation, and I happened to look south, down the lake, and I saw it coming up, and I always knew, he always came within 50 feet of our flags. We had problems with him every day, all the time. But we just got tired over all the years of yelling at him, because he never moved out any further. But anyway, here he comes, and but at this particular time, he was so low in the water, and the bow was so low, and you see in the pictures how high that bow is. Normally, it was so low that it's just plowing water, and water was coming up over the gunnels into the vessel, and the bilges are trying to work like crazy, trying to pump water out. And that's what brought our attention. That's why we watched it so carefully, because as it went by, I was like, like we said before, this is an accident waiting to happen.
Right.
And, sure enough, a few minutes later, over it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That and during the day that we were actually bringing it up and starting to cut the water out of it and stuff like that, the investigators went on board the boat and you could just tell that it was just completely unstable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for our lift bags, that thing would have flipped right over. Yep. Our lift bags still being on the sides were stabilizing that vessel.
Mm.
That's why we were trying to get them to just hold off for a few minutes. Let us just finish pumping it out. We had 2 big pumps working like crazy, trying to pump it out. But as soon as those gunnels came up, they're already stepping into the boat. It's like, geez, give us a break.
And that's
Yeah, I'm
another.
looking at it going, oh my God, it's going to flip over and somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another good point, John, that you made about the modifications and how it sits in the water. So all that water being coming over the gunnels in the bow of the boat. So can you imagine already how unstable that boat is? Just because of the amount of water coming over, then you add all that, the weight of all the passengers. I mean, the boat
then it
is
goes to make
unstable.
that starboard turn, and it starts to plow. So now the boat is starting to be like this. All that water is rushing more toward the bow, and it's now acting like a submarine.
Right.
I mean, it goes down and then kicks right back up again, and
Yeah.
that's what. And we saw the entire prop up out of the water, and you could just hear the exhaust now, because usually the exhaust is underwater. You can just hear it, wow, and then it just slammed down, and that's when I think the pilot did what everybody would do. I mean, hey, it didn't work this way, and they panicked and went hard to port the other way and rolled the vessel right
Yep.
over.
Yeah.
Yep. But again, I mean, that's that was our investigative viewpoint on it,
Yep.
and doesn't agree with the official report of the 5-foot wave, but I think we've proved that probably didn't happen either.
Right.
Yep.
All right.
Anyway, any other questions or anything before we head out of here?
Nothing,
Chad?
Chad?
At least you came on. You made Ed look good.
Yeah. Chad,
That's right.
Chad, who'd you get certified with?
Rich,
John.
actually, John
Who's
was
John.
Lisa was my first instructors for open water.
There you go.
Yep. Well, we wish we could have got you on the team.
That would have been great.
After chatting with you for a while. You were probably kind of young at the time and didn't have a lot of dive experience, though.
Yeah, I know.
But and we require that everybody be a professional diver, and they've got a lot of dive experience under their belt, especially comfort level.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for getting into the fire department and EMS.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's,
And I know it was short notice, but I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
oh, not a problem. It's an honor, actually.
It was like an hour beforehand, and all of a sudden, we're kind of chatting back and forth on Messenger, and it's like, "Hey, you want to be on the show tonight?" What? I said, "You ever done Zoom? What? What's a
What's
Zoom?"
Yeah.
So I think your wife was helping you out, right?
Yeah, it's actually my wife's laptop I'm using. I don't have one.
Yeah, getting
you
that
go.
all figured out.
Hey,
But-
Chad, let me tell you something. Rich, when it comes to the computer or anything, forget about it.
Pro.
Okay? Yeah, he's a pro.
Who
all
helped
right.
walk you through it, Chad?
Yeah, he's a pro, all right. Just John, correct me if I'm wrong. Rich is like, hey, so what is this enter button for?
No, first is what button do I push to turn it on?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
Notice I always keep this right here so I can wipe my tears every time I'm working on the computer, because I am
Yeah.
horrible.
We all got to start somewhere.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think I'm too archaic and I don't have a desire. That's the problem. I don't have a desire to learn the computer. I use it as a word processor. I use it as a glorified typewriter so that I
Right.
can hit print.
But the
print
good
out
thing
letters.
is you're not one of those ones that is just keep clicking.
Yeah.
Well, it's not,
That
John,
used to drive me nuts.
he's not sure what to click. That's the problem.
And my
Exactly.
son
They
works
just
for
start clicking
IBM.
everything, and then you're trying to figure out what they did, and it's like, what didn't they do?
Yeah, right.
My son works for IBM, been with there 25 years now, and he's a computer genius. And I don't get it. I don't get it. When he was in college, he was taking a dual major. He was doing a degree in chemistry and computer science. And I'd call him and be like, "So how's it going?" He'd start talking to me about all of, everything he's doing in detail. And I'm going right over my head. So every now and then I go, "So how's the food?"
How's the weather?
Yeah. But all right,
Oh.
guys.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, on behalf of Chad and John, I'm Senior Investigator Rich Morin. Thanks for joining us on Underwater CSI Revealed. And with me, as always,
And I'm Senior
my-
Investigator Ed Myron.
Ed Myron,
Appreciate you guys.
partner in crime.
Appreciate you guys.
All right, guys.